Guys, we're going to go ahead and get started here. I appreciate everybody in attendance, and trust me, I hate it as much as all of you guys that we're having to talk about this issue again. So hopefully this will be the last time that maybe we need another webinar or a session on this. I think if we're looking at trends, that I think the future is gonna look better for us, I think, in the next month or two. So, but in the meantime, we need to be addressing this issue and figuring out how to navigate it as janitorial contractors, and also looking at some of the potential upsides that go along with this. So, in today's webinar, we do a couple of these a year where we just get questions from people. So we want to hear what you have to say, the things that you're facing on a day-to-day basis, and do our best to give some answers to some of those questions. So we're by no means experts or have all the answers, but I think some of this stuff can be beneficial to you. So we had a ton of questions that were submitted, but what was really good about that is that a lot of them overlap with one another. So it seems like everybody is really dealing with a handful of core issues. And so we've got 8 questions, and some of those have some subpoints in them that we'll be addressing today, and it really hits on just about everything that everyone asks. And so, as always, we typically invite a few guests on. So we've got a few folks that are not part of our mastermind group that are on today's webinar. So we just want to welcome you being on our webinar. So we do these webinars once a month for our mastermind group, and so in addition to some other things that we do, like content that's given out on a weekly basis, like sales and marketing material, our company financials, some video interviews and other video trainings, and we have a group forum where everybody is communicating and chatting on specifically about this issue right now. But the webinars are another thing that we do. So we just want to welcome you as a guest. And if you'd like to learn more about our group, don't hesitate to reach out to me. So one more bit of housekeeping. So we've had a lot of new members. I want to say we've had probably 20 to 25 new members since the beginning of the year this year that have joined our group. And so I get a few questions occasionally about, just questions about the group or missing something or whatever. So I just want to review some things with you guys, just to make sure you're getting the most value out of being a part of the group. So number one is every week I send out a weekly email to everybody that's in the group, and it's something that comes from my personal email account. So if you're not getting that, please let me know. So there's a content schedule that I keep. So the first week of the month, there should be some sort of leader lesson type video. The second week of the month is our company financials with some explanation. The third week of the month is either a webinar or an interview with one of our group members, and then the fourth week is the other of that, so maybe a webinar like this week. There's also the forum on there, so if you guys, most people are using the forum, at least watching it and stalking other people on the forum and looking at responses. So make sure you're a part of that. There's a ton of good info. Again, the best thing about this group as a whole is all of you guys as members. One of the things though that can be a pain in the rear about the forum is the notifications. So whenever you're part of it, you can get notifications on your Chrome browser. You can also get inundated with emails. So there's a way to turn off those notifications or reduce them. So if you go into your settings in Basecamp, if you click on your icon on the top right, you can go in and change your notifications on there so that they don't bug you as much if you don't want that to be the case. So there's a way to monitor that. And then if any of you guys ever want to have any one-to-one conversations with me, I'd be happy to do that. So you certainly can participate in that. Just let me know. All right, so let's dive into our questions, okay? And I've tried to make a little bit of a logical flow here. So we're going to talk about some safety and operational stuff to begin with. We're going to talk about the PPP loan, and there's been some changes and some things that have happened, literally within the last 24 hours that we want to talk about a little bit. And then the remaining questions will be about sales and marketing. So, and today on our call with me, I've got 3 guys with me that all work at our company. I've got Jeff Carmen, who's our VP of Sales and Marketing. I've got Brian Lewis, who's our company president, and Stephen Kidd, who's our regional manager over our Kentucky and Tennessee areas. And so they obviously have expertise in different areas and are certainly more qualified than me to talk on a couple of these issues. So question number 1 is how can we keep our cleaners safe while on the job? And what reasonable steps should we be taking? And then maybe to tie into that question is, how do we balance safety with productivity or profitability? So this question is important because obviously there's risks out there right now with this, but also there are governmental entities that are creating restrictions, and then some of our customers are creating restrictions. So Brian, I'll let you start here. What are some things that we can do to not only keep people safe, but also balance that with the job that we have to do?
Yeah. Well, I think I think we all, as we all try to become pros on this whole topic, I think we have to rely on the CDC, the World Health Organization. And if you look at what the CDC says about this, I mean, it says very specifically, quote, the risk of exposure to cleaning staff is inherently low, right? So as we think about this, oftentimes we think about it in terms of a plague or something, and in all reality, it's not quite that. Okay, so I think as we're giving our team members, the proper PPE, mostly things that they would normally wear, so gloves and glasses when necessary. Maybe a mask, volunteer masks if they want to wear masks on the job. Maybe an apron type thing. The CDC does recommend gloves and aprons. It does not say you have to wear a mask or anything like that. So I think just using common sense and educating our team members on the fact that this isn't that much different than other viruses that we've had to deal with in the past. I think we owe it to them to educate them well and provide kind of whatever they want in regard to PPE. So
yeah, Stephen, is this causing the safety issue? I know you have some workers that are asking questions about this, and you also have customers that are demanding certain things. Has this affected the way that you guys go about the operation, and has it made you guys have to change anything, or how are you navigating it day to day?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily changed anything operationally, but we have had to be really careful in making sure that one of the things I was thinking about with this question is having to have the masks readily available, because certain customers are requiring it, others aren't. Certain team members want them, certain don't. So the biggest thing for us is just having those things available. So I think it's really important that we've done that. Because again, some want them, some don't. And really there's nothing out there, like Brian said, that they're requiring it. You don't have to have the mask. So really I haven't seen a huge effect in how we're operating necessarily.
Yeah, and so one of the things that's important, so in the state of Kentucky, we just had our governor issued a new order that says starting May 11th, everyone would be required to wear masks. And specifically in businesses, they'll be required, or you can be shut down. And so one of the things that they're doing though with that is that you don't have to have medical grade masks. So you don't have to have N95s or KN95 masks, but it can be cloth masks. And the point of this is to keep people from. It's designed more for the person that might have the coronavirus as opposed to somebody to keep them from getting it. So the protection is to keep somebody from distributing particulates into the air. Yeah. And so cloth masks or other types of masks are acceptable. So part of this is a perception thing, and part of this is you're often doing it not necessarily to protect yourself, but to protect others. So you don't have to feel the need to get KN95s. Other things will suffice during this time. Do you think it's fair?
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think it's also important to kind of keep an eye on our team members that are in the field. I think, if somebody is sick, I think we have to make them stay out of work. I think that's super important. I think if we have team members that are high risk kind of people, so they might be, elderly, they might have underlying diseases or whatever, I think it's up to us to really kind of work with them, especially to help keep them out of certain areas, especially if there's a reported case of COVID or anything like that. I think we owe it to our team members to really kind of stay close and help cater to them to keep them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So at the end, though, this shouldn't have an effect on productivity. So we should be able to maintain status quo in terms of our operational efficiency.
I think that's fair.
Okay, so this question's a big one. There was a ton of people that had questions that were related to this, and it's how do we handle disinfection requests? So let's maybe talk about a couple things to this. Let's talk first of all about the processes that we can go through to do this. So if somebody wants us to come in and do some disinfecting work, there's the fogging machines, but there's also, those are limited in quantity and supply.
Yeah.
So maybe talk a little bit about the types of processes and methods that we go about to do disinfecting work, and then we'll move on to some of the other aspects of it.
Yeah. Stephen, you want this? You want me to take it?
As far as methods, I would think, like Jordan said, there's the electrostatic misters. You've got foggers out there, but the common one is just standard a disinfectant that's strong enough to kill the virus that's rated for that, and it's just spray. Dwell time's key, making sure that that your team members are familiar with that. But what I'm finding and running into with a lot of the customers is because they're aware of the electrostatic, you don't have most of the customers want that specifically, so they're willing to pay extremely high prices for that as opposed to just the standard spray dwell and then wipe off. But
that has become a really kind of hot thing and a really known thing. The whole electrostatic method has really become well known this season, more so than in the past. So we have the traditional spray and wipe methods. It's a good method. It's as thorough as the person doing it. Really, it's very kind of very low productivity rate, very high labor rate. So it doesn't tend to be as profitable maybe as some of the other types of items. You got a really long dwell time in some cases with your disinfectant. I mean, disinfectants have dwell times out there anywhere from, a couple of minutes up to 10 minutes.
So talk to me about chemical. Yeah. This may be a dumb question, but what chemicals are appropriate to use and which ones would not be appropriate in disinfecting? What classification of chemical do we need for this?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. So historically, our company has been set up. We've always disinfected restrooms, as an example. The disinfectant that we have historically used in restrooms is not strong enough to kill this virus and certain other viruses. So, the EPA, and we can throw it on the Mastermind site, or it's probably out there already, but the EPA and there are several approved lists that are out there with qualifying disinfectants that are qualified to kill SARS-related type viruses like this. You definitely have to be careful with what type of disinfectant you use, whether you are using traditional spray and wipe methods or foggers or electrostatic or whatever. So, electrostatic has definitely been kind of the overwhelming way that most of us have gone out and helped our customers, I think, during this season compared to others. As opposed to traditional kind of spray and wipe, it is very, very high productivity rate. Typically anywhere from, it is a huge range, but anywhere from probably 8 or 10,000 square feet an hour to probably up to 30, 40,000, just depending on the level of gun that you have or sprayer that you have. So the good news, it's very easy to train on. It's not an art like stripping and waxing a floor. So it's low labor, high productivity, very effective. The advantage of electrostatic over some of the other methods is its charge. So that spray tends to wrap around items as opposed to just spraying on the front end of it.
Yeah.
So huge advantage.
And what would a production rate be for a traditional spray and wipe sort of disinfectant? Are you going to be down in the 2,000 square feet an hour range, or?
Yeah, I would say probably 2,000 to 4,000 square feet an hour, probably for spray and wipe methods.
What about pricing between the two? So if you're pricing it, one's much faster, one's more labor intensive, but one has a much more expensive piece of equipment with it, and the demand is higher for it. It's at least in the eyes of the customer, a better service. So what does the pricing differ between the two, or is it about the same price at the end of the day for both methods?
Yeah. There are lots of smart people out there in this industry, and everybody knows their kind of the speed of their people and the speed of the way they do business a little bit, better. But the way we've approached it, as a rule of thumb, if and we're talking about above and beyond pricing. So pricing that's for additional service or additional disinfection above and beyond a core program. If we do spray and wipe method, we typically will use a T&M type labor basis because it is very, very labor involved. It uses a very high amount of chemical.
Give me a ballpark range of the T&M price that we're using.
Yeah, so if it's additionally charged, we will typically try to pay our team members an equivalent to time and a half. So
Okay.
as opposed to paying them a regular hourly rate, what they would normally be used to, we would try for any additional service for disinfection, we would pay them time and a half. So obviously that would need to come into play with our T&M rate. So I think we typically will start in the $25 an hour range, and it can sometimes go up depending on
Okay.
other.
Now, is there any certifications that are needed for any of this stuff, or
I would say no, and the reason for that is, I mean, it happens so quickly. I mean, the ability to get certified in something that we're really all still trying to figure out. I mean, I haven't ran into a situation where anybody's asked for a certification
Correct.
to be able to disinfect in this way.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay. And then lastly, are we when you're going out to perform this work, do you have a certain crew of people that are doing most of this work for you, or are you training existing team members on site, or is it a little bit of both?
It's a little bit of both. Yeah. We've really tried to lean on existing crews as much as possible. I mean, for obvious reasons, you can keep your rates down a little bit as far as the wages that we are paying our folks. And, we become a lot more versatile. The more people that we have that are equipped to do this, the more work that we're going to be able to accomplish. If we've got one crew that normally does additional service work like carpet cleaning or floor refinishing, we're just limited as to how many customers we can service. So the more people that we've trained and the more people that we put these machines and the ability to do this work in their hands, the more of that we can do. And because it's so easily trained, it hasn't been difficult to get a lot of people on board with doing the work.
Even the electrostatic sprayer?
It's extremely simple. There's about a 2.5-minute video from the manufacturer that the machine we're using. You can watch that video and be fully equipped to go out and spray with that machine.
I think it is important to note, we were talking about pricing a minute ago, and we talked about T&M for traditional spray and wiping. I think it is very important that and y'all probably know this, but as we're using foggers or electrostatic spray or even just non-electrostatic spray, I think it's important to price all those additionally serviced jobs, disinfection jobs, by the square foot and not on a T&M basis. Otherwise, our productivity rate is so high, you would make no money if you charged a T&M rate on that. So.
Okay. All right. So question number 3 is, and Jeff, this is probably something that we can turn to you on here. So how can we market to get disinfecting work from both new or existing customers? And Stephen, you may be able to comment here as well, but are there any other ways to make money during this time? So what are some ways that maybe we can educate customers or get out in front of customers? Because obviously a lot of us are having some reductions, and we want to make up those reductions with additional bill work if possible. So is there, in terms of marketing, how can we do a better job there to maybe get some more of this revenue in from this?
Yeah, in fact, I think that's one of the opportunities, if you will, that's going to come out of this whole COVID situation is this disinfecting business is a whole separate line of business that most of us can get in. The good side of it is there's a low barrier to entry for us, right? You get some equipment and some supplies, but the downside of it is there's a low barrier to entry. So there's going to be, I think, a lot of other people that enter this market. So the first thing I would say is really to become an expert in the field of disinfecting. I would say there's a lot of information that's out there, and you can use manufacturers' brochures to help you in that, and post those things on your website and as you're visiting with existing or prospective customers. But I think you need to go a step further and really address questions that people will have about those things. Like, for instance, a question I would have if I were a customer is, can you spray that on computers and keyboards? Do I need to clean the stuff off my desk? How quickly can we get back in the building? So just answering those questions, and you can come up with a little one-pager that'd be frequently asked questions. I would consider maybe even branding that business a little different, just because If you were to Google search right now, because I did it this morning, disinfecting services near me. I did that this morning, and there was not a single janitorial company that came up. There was ServPro and restoration companies and those kinds of folks. So that's who's already in this business. So we either work with your person who does your website so that you can begin to put that as a part of your website, or it may be that it comes out, it's just a different business line that you have that you call, Acme Disinfecting Company, something like that. I did happen to when I was looking, there was an article that said on one of these restoration sites that says why janitors and home cleaners aren't prepared to clean after COVID-19. So those folks are competing against us in that side. And then the last thing I would say about that is maybe consider non-traditional markets like convenience stores and restaurants, retailers, those kinds of things. But I would think of that as a different line of business.
Yeah, so let me ask you this question here, and before we move on, do you think that that this provides, let's say you have a list of prospective clients that you'd like to do business with, do you feel like it's appropriate to approach them about disinfecting work as a possible entry?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I think so for sure. Yeah.
Okay, good. Stephen, are you guys doing anything else other than disinfecting right now that is coming about as a result of this? Any other additional services that have maybe popped on the scene at all?
Not really. I mean, as far as the question's concerned, the one thing that I think may be helpful for some of the other building service contractors out there, and it's something we're trying to push to our customers, is, for the facilities that are shutting down and they're trying to say, hey, we're not going to be in the building, we want you guys out of the building. What we've really pushed, just so that we can continue to generate revenue from those locations, is, we kind of take a hit in a sense, but we're saying, hey, your floor refinishing that normally would be scheduled for 3 months down the road or 6 months down the road, let's go ahead and we're going to do that for you during this period. Any type of deep cleaning services, just things that normally when normal production's going on you can't do. We're offering those services at basically our normal monthly rates. And in some facilities that'll work, some it won't. But it just allows us to continue keeping our people working. Yep. And I think that's been, other than disinfecting, that's really been the only thing we've focused on during this time. So
okay. That's good. So next question number 4, how can we limit liability in the following areas? So employees cleaning out in the field, in limiting our liability there, and then customers requesting disinfecting work. How can we limit our liability there? So I'll take a stab at this to begin with. So we talked earlier about safety. I think with all of this, communication is going to be key. So we don't want to make promises that we can't follow through on, and so we want to be very realistic in what we're doing. So. We are considered an essential business, so we're not breaking any rules by staying in business. And I think if we're making PPE available and safety measures available, and we're not forcing anybody to do anything that they don't want to do. And I know probably everyone's had some situations where a person's had just rather not work. I don't feel safe. That we need to be considerate of that and not force the issue there. And I'm not sure what the legalities are there with unemployment on that particular situation. Yeah. But so I think that would be important on that end. So I don't necessarily think that there's a situation where we're needing waivers. And I think we need to do the same thing when we're doing disinfecting work. So if we know there's a confirmed case somewhere, we just need to be really transparent about what we're asking our people to do. And I think that would be critical. And I think on the customer end, the same thing would be the case. So, people are asking questions about, customers, let's say we do a disinfecting job and then somebody comes back and gets sick at work, and they try to hold you liable for that. So I think, number one, it would be really important for us when we go to do this work that we're not making any promises that we're not going to be able to keep. So we're going to perform a specific service for them, but we're not promising that we're going to have a 0% infection rate for the next 30 days at their facility, because obviously we can't promise that or make good on that promise. So I don't think that unless you're promising certain things, it seems unlikely that we would get into any sort of a legal situation given the nature of this. So I would encourage you to talk to your attorney about that if you still feel uneasy about that. So I don't know if you guys have any additional thoughts on that particular question.
No, I think this liability thing with this situation is still kind of like a lot of other spots. It's still a little bit gray. I think in regard to team members or employees, this is really kind of a time for us to cater to our people a little bit. I completely understand, as much as we try to inform people that, they are important to us and we're doing everything we can to keep them safe, and that this is not, once again, kind of the plague necessarily. I just think it's a time for us to really kind of cater to people, and if somebody doesn't feel comfortable coming in, then let's work with them on that. I think it's obviously a very wrong move to terminate somebody for that at this point. I don't think that would be very, very beneficial for us to do. I think in regard to customers, I think like you talked about, I think it's important for us to do a couple of things. Number one, I think we need to communicate to customers as we're disinfecting. We are doing a great job reducing or eliminating bacteria and germs, but at the end of the day, the moment somebody walks into that building, germs come back in. So I think it's important to do that. I actually saw at one point a bit of advice as we're putting together literature and marketing material for disinfection services. Saw a piece of advice that was really good, and it actually said to word things in such a way that not that we are disinfecting, rather we are applying disinfectant. Oddly enough. And it kind of just, once again, kind of covers us that we're not necessarily just wiping things out completely forever. But,
yeah, that's good. That's good. Okay, so question number 5 is an update on the PPP loan. So everybody's having questions as well about the PPP loans in terms of, there was obviously the initial funds ran out. Congress approved a second round of funds that are being processed right now. But there have been some changes, and there's obviously some things about full forgiveness. And so what recommendations would we have and what cautions would we have? So let me just give a quick overview about the loan for those maybe that aren't in the know, which most of you guys probably are. So the loan is basically, you can apply for it through your local bank or an SBA-approved lender. You have to meet certain qualifications. Most of you all on this webinar will likely meet those qualifications. Basically, less than 500 employees or $19 million in revenue. And you can apply for 2.5 times your monthly payroll number. And then there's an 8-week measuring period on whether or not that loan is forgivable. And it's based on essentially keeping your head count and keeping your payroll numbers steady. And you can also use some of that money for utilities and mortgage interest and rent and that sort of thing. And that, on the face of it, this is supposed to be forgiven if you meet those certain qualifications. It's a really minimal list of qualifications. But there have been some changes that have come about, so I'll mention a couple of those, and Brian, you may have some additional info on that. So one thing that's really important that I just learned about a couple of days ago is that during the measurement period, they're going to be looking at your cash inflow and outflow as it relates to these items that are forgivable. So payroll, rent, utilities, that sort of thing. They're going to be looking at cash that goes out during the measurement period. So they're not going to be looking at your accruals. So for instance, if you've got a payroll cycle that runs and you get a loan on April 1st, and that measurement period is going to be for 8 weeks, but you've got payroll that will be accruing during that time period but will be paid out after the measurement period, that accrual that you built up towards the end will not count towards your measurement numbers, so it would be less that could be forgiven. So whether or not that's right or not that should be the case, several financial advisors and accountants have been writing about this particular issue, so just make note of that. Maybe talk to your accountant. So if you feel like you're in a good spot to get a lot of it forgiven, you may want to have an extra payroll cycle or something. Another thing, they just came out, we got a letter from our bank today that the SBA is now saying that they're going to be auditing all loans over $2 million to make sure that the forgiveness requirements are being met, and they're going to look at things like revenue. Because obviously we've all been asking this question, like for us in our industry, this seems like free money for a lot of people because our revenue hasn't gone down. So they're starting to look at addressing that, but they basically have said changes and new guidelines are forthcoming. So my caution or recommendation is that we just do not count on any of this money. So assume that you're going to have to pay it all back. There's just too much up in the air, and I think we should all be wise enough to know that we shouldn't trust the government to be 100% clear on this, and that they could always come back. So let's just make sure that we're being good stewards of this money and using it wisely with the anticipation of having to pay it back. So as they say, there ain't no free lunch, and that certainly is the case here. So Brian, do you have anything else to add there?
Not on changes. I think just in regard to getting the full forgiveness, my initial thought coming into this thing, with the lender being the one that makes the decision on forgiveness as opposed to the SBA or the Department of Treasury or the U.S. government, my initial thought was, gosh, they're going to do everything they can to forgive these loans for their customers, because mostly these loans are going to their existing customers. But I think we need to be prepared. I think the forgiveness piece of this thing is going to be a lot more in the weeds and a lot more substantial than at least I initially thought. So I think it's just, once again, documentation is going to be crucial. There are a couple of things that are even still up in the air with how FTEs are calculated and a few other things. But I just think it's super important that everybody track and document very well, can keep copies of invoices, keep copies of checks that paid those invoices. I came across after I built one, I came across a really great spreadsheet that you can kind of use to help document all this stuff. I'm more than happy to post that on the Mastermind site.
So to tie into that, one of the things, and some folks on the group had recommended this, so this is not my idea by any means, but that it goes along with tracking this, is that, and I think this is what we're going to do, is have a separate account that this money goes into, and then all these expenses, only pay those forgivable expenses out of this account, and then operate the rest of your business out of another account. And that way there's a really clean record of where the actual monies went, how they came in and how they left. And if that goes along with your accounting records, it'll just be very easy to process this. So if forgiveness is going to be a really viable thing, and it's going to happen for a lot of you, having a really, really clean track record of where everything went will make that process really easy and increase your likelihood of getting forgiveness, all things considered.
Yeah. And I think the additional payroll that you mentioned, really think about that 8-week period. So think about the day that you get funded. If you've already been funded, work out on a calendar the 8 weeks from that day and see how that plays into your existing payroll cycle. And I saw some documentation actually from an attorney that said change to weekly payroll within the 8 weeks if you need to. There's really nothing that says, that in the paperwork that says you can't. So I don't know. That sounds a little extreme, but do whatever you need to do to fix.
It's crazy
to get as much payroll in that 8-week time span as possible, I guess.
It's crazy. So another question related to this. So after getting the loan, how are we keeping our headcounts up, or are we doing that? And are you paying people to sit at home? What if customer locations are closed down? So the whole purpose of this loan was not to benefit businesses necessarily. It was to keep workers working, right? But they've also increased unemployment benefits and given stimulus checks. And so this whole thing has gotten really complicated, all right? And so, and I'm not here to point fingers at anybody. Everybody's trying to do the right thing. Like, I totally believe that. Yeah. But it's just really messy. So with customer locations shut down, and I know for us, it's interesting, we've had upticks in business in some areas where we got a lot more work going on, and then in other areas we've got a lot of stuff that's dropped off because of all this. So, Stephen, how are we navigating that? Are we, in locations, are we putting people to work? Have we laid people off? How are we?
Yeah, so kind of going through a little bit of a flow. Step one would obviously be, okay, if a facility shuts down and they've asked us not to work in that building, our first goal would be, and I mentioned this earlier, let's try to offer some, any type of additional services that would allow us to stay in the building, because we don't want to pay people if they're going to be at home, right? We would want to, get something out of our money. So the first step would be to try to allow that customer to keep us in the building. When that doesn't work, we look at, facilities that are open around us or around that particular account that we might be able to just move team members into those areas. So that way, they're not working in their normal building, but for the customer site that those folks are in, that place is going to look really, really good whenever, this is over and people come back. And really, after we've kind of exhausted those two options, we have, in some cases, there are some people sitting at home, but the goal would be is to try to get them into another facility as quickly as we possibly can, because we don't want to pay people to sit at home.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, and my suggestion here, so I think because of the uncertainty of how the forgiveness piece on this is going to work, I would not put people to work that you don't have work for, and based on the loan itself. So, again, they could put restrictions in place that if you don't drop, there was a proposal that was submitted by one of the senators that, if you don't have more than like a 60 or 70% drop in revenue, that you're not going to get forgiven. And so, I wouldn't, bet the farm and put a bunch of people to work thinking you're going to get forgiven, because there's just so much uncertainty there. So, thinking about it as a leader and thinking about it as from an ethical standpoint and wanting to lead well and and show your people that you care about them, I would treat this as if there was no loan on the table and you're trying to do the right thing for your people. So if that means you take a hit a little bit but because you're trying to keep people working, then do it with the expectation that you won't get any money. But I wouldn't pay people to go count paper clips and wash your car and things like that. So do your best to provide extra service to customers. If you want to bite the bullet and just take a hit on profit so that you can help keep people working, do that without any expectation of getting anything back for it. So I wouldn't pay people to sit at home, but if you've got work or can stomach giving some extra work to people and that's what you want to do, then I would do that. So I'd consider this more from a leadership standpoint as to what's the right thing to do and less from how can I get the maximum amount of forgiveness. All right, getting away from the nitty-gritty of the loans, question number 7, we've got 2 more questions here. So how will this pandemic affect customer expectations going forward, and how can we adapt our operation to meet those new expectations? So, Jeff, I'll let you start with this on the expectation piece, because you have been talking about doing some Google research and that sort of thing. And, so we'll talk about it from a sales side and an operations side. So as you think about going forward selling and you're selling to new prospects, do you think this affects the way the customer thinks about the buying process, and how might this, and I know we'll get into this a little bit more with the next question, but do you see anything on the horizon that would change in this regard?
I think I'll just go back and I'll say it over and over. I think it's a great time for us to educate, and hopefully we can come out of this, or will look like kind of experts in the field. I think we have a great opportunity right now. I wrote here in my notes that, kind of almost overnight, our business we were largely an afterthought. If you really get down to it, in a lot of places we were an afterthought, and now almost overnight again we've become this trusted advisor that's keeping their building safe. And so I think we have a great opportunity, but in order to take advantage of that, I just think that we have to give our customers a lot of information about what is disinfecting, what's the difference between cleaning and disinfecting, how that's going to affect production rates, and all of those kinds of things.
Yeah. So, Brian, what about on the operational end? Do you think this, going through this, everybody keeps saying, you listen to the news, you listen to the doctors, and everybody's talking that things are going to change permanently. And, we're all waiting. Like, is
the new normal.
The new normal, right. Is that going to be the case? And I don't know. I don't know if that will be the case. It's possible things will change, Are we going to forever give up handshakes and be in a mask-wearing culture? I don't know. But do you think, as it relates to us and our customers, will this change anything about the dynamic of how we serve people?
Actually, yes. Yeah, I'm not a big cliche guy, but I do think this will kind of be a new normal in relation to our industry. I think people are going to be more in touch with disinfection than they have in the past, even though flu has been historically a much more prevalent thing than this even. I know we are going to, we've already discussed stepping back and kind of restructuring a little bit and maybe putting a little more emphasis to our existing customers and to new customers, a little more emphasis on cleaning for sickness prevention as opposed to cleaning to make things clean. I think there will be a bigger focus out there on that now. I think not only with core programs, but especially, once these virus seasons roll around, October to March, I think it'll be a great opportunity to increase our additional sales through disinfection, services and that stuff. So, and I think Jeff made a great point. We've always fought in our industry to be credible, reliable, consultative, kind of to really kind of bring value to our customers. And this is a great opportunity for us to step that up. I think it's a great point. And I think we can kind of provide more value to our customers in this regard than we have in the past. So, yeah.
Anything to add to that, Stephen, that you see on the...
No, not really. I think it's going to vary from customer to customer, but it's definitely going to be something that we're expected to know a lot about, and we're going to be expected to be able to perform. And I think just kind of piggybacking off of what they said, though, it does allow us to become credible in some ways, and what we offer is a lot more important today than it was 2 months ago. And so it's going to affect a lot of from a customer expectation perspective, I think they'll still expect a lot and want want to pay a little, but it's going to be our jobs to kind of again inform and really fight for that value added service that we want to be. But I don't really have anything else.
No, that's a great point. I mean, the struggle we always have is, we've got this great thing, but are our customers willing to pay for it or the proper amount for it? Which probably furthers us becoming as educated as we can be on all this stuff to really kind of justify that.
Yeah, because if you don't, you're going to get forced into that, that little hole of, we expect you to do this, but we don't want to pay more. Yeah. So I think the more educated we are on this particular, the disinfecting of surfaces and those types of things, we're going to be able to play it in a way that, hey, this is added value, and it's going to come at a cost.
Yeah.
Right. So.
Yeah. So another question, or somebody just asked a question about, Mike Eller asked a question about, okay, we've got all these contracts in place, and you're counting on this work, and we have a certain amount of overhead that goes with this, right? And the bigger your company gets, the more overhead that you've got with it. Yeah. So, and now they're saying, well, we don't need you for the next, month, but you've got a 3-year contract in place, and you're counting on this revenue. So, one question for you, Stephen, is how are you navigating that? And then number 2, Brian, maybe do you think that we should modify our contracts at some point going forward to deal with the potential for these kinds of issues?
Yeah, that's tough. I honestly haven't gotten into a situation where, hey, Mr. Customer, Mrs. Customer, this agreement's in place and we're going to hold you to paying us for this month out. For me, I always look at it like I'm trying to establish a relationship with that customer for the long haul. And if, as a company, we can survive this little hit, I feel like, by trying to do them a favor and not necessarily a favor, but just kind of, abiding by their request to say, hey, we need you out of this facility, and just hoping that this ends quickly. So I really haven't got into a situation where I've had to press any customer for, hey, we have an agreement in place, and we expect you to pay us even though we're not servicing you, right? So I don't know. Really.
Yeah, Brian, do you think we modify contracts going forward? Or do you think it's either way? Because I agree with Stephen. Our goal is not to stick it to somebody, and exactly. It sucks. But if you're not going to stay with them long term if you really screw them over in a time like this. Yeah,
Look, the reality is our success obviously we want to have great quality at our customer locations, but a big piece of our success boils down to relationships that we have with these people. So hopefully in our locations, in our customer sites, we have relationships that are strong enough to allow us to sit down and have good, meaningful conversations with these people. So to answer your question, sometimes we might find it worth it to, if we have a great margin at an account, we might find it worth it to kind of include some high-touch disinfection work with our existing scopes. And in others, the reality is, especially if it's just outrageously important to them and the level to which they want us to disinfect, it's definitely going to be worth sitting down and adjusting scopes and contracts. Yeah.
But practically speaking, in some locations, we've been able to keep a bare bones crew there, even though there hadn't been hardly anybody there, or we've done extra work like you were saying earlier. So knowing this is short term, we've been able to navigate that. Yeah. But if it drug on for 6 months, this could get hairy in a hurry.
But I think that pays off financially as well in the long term. I think, as we work with customers and do this while they're down, this is a two-way partnership. It's got to be good for both of us. The reality is when it comes time to grow with them, we're there. And when it comes time to renew that contract, it's going to be a no-brainer that it happens with us, or it should be, So...
All right, last question. And Jeff, we've saved the heavy hitter for last here for you. So how can we position ourselves from a sales and marketing standpoint in a post-pandemic market? So what does this look like for us going forward? And maybe, because it's impossible to predict, what this will look like long term. But as we think about coming out of this on the other end, and I know you've kind of pulled back the reins a little bit on selling and marketing because of all this. So, let's say that everything's back up and running by the end of June and you're ready to roll. What does this look like for you? Does that change anything that you're currently doing from a sales and marketing standpoint in the way you present, the way you brand, that sort of thing?
Yeah. And again, I'll go back to, I'll continue to beat this drum. It's just having good information and material. And when I say material, I'm talking little short articles or just information that you have that you can educate. Because people are going to have more questions. Prospective customers are going to have a lot more questions than they ever have from our industry over the next, let's call it 6 to 8 months. So if we can become really good experts in not only this information, but also sharing, how things like how do we develop our price and what are production rates and how do those matter? Those are things that are going to be helpful when we go in and we're talking about price to customers, because we can do that with our existing customers and prospective customers. They really need to realize probably they're going to have to increase their budget for janitorial and disinfecting, and probably more so than ever. Maybe there's an open window for that decision maker to go to their supervisor or boss and go, look, we need to increase our budget. And here's why. And if here's why is information that you've given them about production rates and how long it takes to disinfect and those things, that'll be helpful to them. So I've just educate continually. One thing I would say too is to look at your mix of customers, and if it's possible, diversify your mix. So one question that someone came through here was, hey, what's going to happen to all these commercial buildings that sent all their employees home to work from home and now realize, heck, we don't have to pay rent anymore in these high-rise buildings. Let's just have everybody work from home. And I think that's a real issue to consider. And so I don't have an answer to what you do on that other than to diversify. So we have a pretty good chunk of our business that's in the manufacturing sector, and it seemed like some of those were the last to close and some of those were essential, so they stayed open. And so I guess think through businesses like, for instance, medical outpatient facilities is a good segment. Churches, even though they're closed now, I don't think churches are going to go completely online. So I think those churches are going to open back up after this is over. But just have a look at your market and see if there's ways to diversify. We talked about increasing or starting disinfecting services. I think that's a good thing as a side business. And then I think there's the last piece is to think about if there's other little niche businesses that you can get in with existing customers that then could grow to other business lines.
Yeah. And Jeff, I know you've been working on a couple marketing pieces and some articles, and for our group members, we'll share a little bit of that content with you all. Just to help you get a feel for, because you talk about educating, is putting out good information to help them think through. So we talk a lot about being an expert and adding value, and now is really the time to be able to do that. So, and I think the diversity thing is good. So as you think about mapping out your strategy going forward, and again, I harp on, like, you want to be in a spot where your company, even though you may never want to sell, that you want to be in a spot where you're valuable and you could sell, and that means a really stable organization and a good mix of clients. And so this just really illustrates that you don't want debt and you don't want all your eggs in one basket. Right. So just, good principles on that. So guys, I appreciate you guys being willing to do this, and thank you everybody who has joined us for this. So I'll be posting a copy of this in our group, along with the slides and some other follow-up content with some articles and some other things that may be helpful. There was several questions that were asked on here and I just couldn't get to. I need to be a good steward of your time, but feel free to dialogue about those in the forum, or if you guys would like to schedule a call to talk about any of this stuff. And any of y'all that are not members of our group and want to discuss that, don't hesitate to reach out to me, and be happy to talk to you about that. So again, thanks again for being a part of this, and we'll talk to you soon.